Good evening, Steve. How are you today?
Hey, Jeremy, how are you?
I'm doing excellent. Good day today.
It was busy, but it was good. It's a
Good.
sweet
Good.
day.
Good. So why are we here tonight?
Well, last time we talked about the whole question of how we know there's a God. And, this is all about faith, right? This channel.
Mhm. Yeah.
And, and of course, the question about God rests on evidence, but there's the evidence, at least in our current setting, we can't see God. We can't feel him. We can't touch him. And so there's room for faith here. And our talk today is going to focus on trying to build a foundation for faith.
I mean, I think science today really has almost a monopoly on God because it is about things you can see and do. So, I think we need to prove God's real, in a simplistic way so somebody like me can understand that.
Well, I don't know that we can ever come to the point of proving God or not, but we can certainly see evidence of God and
Nope.
evidence for a rational faith. When we look at the competing ideologies out there that look at the question of origins, God versus abiogenesis, life from random processes.
A fish, maybe?
Yeah. And so, when you look at that, the question that we're going to be asking today is how do we get there?
Hmm.
How do we get to the point of belief in God in a rational basis?
Yep. I'm all ears. I'm all ears.
Well, let's move on. So the other day, I noticed um, looking at our wood stove that there was the number 7 written on the inside glass of our wood stove. And the writing was about probably 3 inches tall, written in the style of calligraphy. So I asked my wife and my daughter if they had written it there, but they each denied it. There was no one else around who would have done this. And so I came to the conclusion that this was something that happened by chance. In other words, not everything that looks like design is. Now, I've been thinking a bit about design. I have a background in mechanical engineering. And as I was thinking about design, there are things you can recognize that a designer had his hand in things because it's intentional. Things that might give evidence of design or that would predict design might include planning its future appearance or composition or function or meaning or lifespan, the costs that might be incurred through that design process. And so those are all things that a designer might include as they're thinking about what design should be.
What
And
they want to
so
make.
what do you want to make?
Okay.
Yeah. And so for instance, if I took a piece of paper out and I put a dot in the middle of that paper and you found that piece of paper, would you think that there was design?
I mean, if the paper, I would assume somebody would have to make,
Yeah. How about
and
the
the
well,
dot somebody would have to make.
I suppose it could have been a bird flying over. And when you look at that, you think, well, that might be evidence for design, but it might be evidence that some other process happened here.
Happen.
So a dot on a piece of paper is certainly not very good evidence of design. How about a straight line on a piece of paper or a circle on a piece of paper? Is that more evidence for design than, for instance, that dot?
I would say so,
I think
but
so. What's the difference between the two?
one's more complicated.
Yeah, it took more effort to do it. What about if you saw a painting of a flower? Would the painting of a flower give evidence for design?
Somebody created it.
Someone made it. Someone sat down and decided, the colors, the shape, the background. Those are all parts of design. Now, if you move into other human activity, what about the computer that we're using to do this podcast? Clear evidence of design. No one would argue that this computer that I'm using currently did not have a designer.
Had to make it, make the parts, put it together,
Right.
assemble. I mean, it's just yeah.
And so as you move from one level of complexity to another, it seems that it becomes less and less likely that someone would argue for no designer.
Hmm.
So when I think about that, going back to that flower, no one would argue that a painting didn't have a designer.
Hmm.
What about a flower itself? How many people would argue that that flower didn't have a designer? Well, it's
It
interesting. Go ahead.
yeah, no, I'm sorry. I just you put that pretty simplistic so that even I can understand that. Um, that my mind is almost trained. If I see a picture, somebody did it.
Who's
If
the
I see
painter?
a real right on a piece of paper, where if I go into a field and I see flowers all over the place, oh, well, it's interesting. They may be beautiful on the field, but I don't have the same impression. But you're absolutely right. It takes more intelligence to actually design a flower than it does. Now that being said, I can't paint at all, but if I could, um, I would assume that it would take more energy and planning to make that flower than it would a painting of a flower.
So, does one's understanding of the complexity of an object inform one's judgment on the likelihood of design?
My opinion, the older I get, if you look at our atmosphere, weather, and you turn on the news and you watch the weather forecast, and I don't know what the percentage they're right because it's so complicated that with all our modern technology, we still cannot forecast 100%, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're always off. So, I mean, even just taking a look at our atmosphere and knowing the complexity with all these supercomputers and all the science we have, we still can't get that right. And the older I get, like I just said, you see the earth in a new light, I think. And it is amazing how absolutely everything had to be perfect for me and you to sit here tonight and even have a discussion on it.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of that's eye opening for me as an individual.
So, when I look at that flower, and then I look at other living cells and the study of microbiology and the incredible complexity that's contained in a living cell. And of course, living organisms are comprised of many cells. The cell isn't only far more complex than our most complex computers,
Mm.
that cell can also reproduce itself. And the information that drives that reproduction is so tiny that you can only see it with an electron microscope. Fascinating. And I think for me, that's there's design here. And the question is, where did that design come from? Did it come about by random processes? And when you think about random processes, no one, you ask the most um, educated, no one would argue that a 747 or a 767 came about by chance. But when we see a flower or a human hand or a human being, all of a sudden, the complexity that's in us, which is way more than the complexity that's seen in a 767, that is all of a sudden something that came about by chance. And I think one has to answer the question, what's the mechanism? How did chance make for organized structure? Because it's not something that we see in our macroscopic level. We simply don't see that. What we see is a concept called entropy, which is entropy increases as disorder happens. And we all know what disorder is like.
Mm.
My desk at work quickly go into disorder. And that's just the natural way things happen. For instance, when an animal lives out its life, it dies and order goes to disorder those living cells degenerate. I would think it's helpful here to draw a line. When evolutionists talk about evolution, what they're often talking about is not the process of life forming, but life evolving. In other words, they're talking about mutations that happen to already existing living systems.
So basically, they're taking out a key part and basically taking the first part of what has to happen out before you can have evolution, or in their minds, evolution. So that's pretty fascinating in itself. I've never actually really thought of that.
So let's stop for a second and look at the question of how, we're comprised of proteins. Our DNA encodes for those proteins. And so when a protein forms, it's formed as a result of the instruction set included in our DNA. Now, the interesting thing to me is that that protein, and frankly, no one argues that that protein came about by chance. What they argue is that the DNA arose through chance processes. And the question that I have, how would the instruction manual form when this is supposedly random mutations? But to have a protein structure form, you've got to have incredible complexity in order to form that protein. In other words, the instruction set had to have been formed before the protein. And so it's backwards, because you got to have the instruction set before you have the protein. It can't be the other way around. And then you have to have this incredible complexity, because you have to have a living organism to generate the DNA to form the protein. As I've looked at this and the probabilities involved, there is no way that you and I came about by chance. There is no doubt in my mind but that we were formed by an intelligent being, by a designer. Because there's no way you and I recognize design all the time. The hat you're wearing, someone designed it. But someone designed my hand. And that complexity, this hand that's way more complex than anything we see around us, it did not come about by chance. So as we think about this, there are other lines of argument, but the thing that I find fascinating here is that when I look at the Bible paints a picture of God designing. In Genesis 1:1, it says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." Psalm 19, 1-3, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Day unto day utters speech, and night unto night reveals knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard." Jeremiah 10:12, "He has made the earth by his power. He has established the world by his wisdom, and has stretched out the heavens at his discretion." Isaiah 40, starting in verse 26, it says this, "Lift up your eyes on high, and see who has created these things, who brings out their host by number, and calls them all by name. By the greatness of his might and the strength of his power, not one is missing. Why do you say, O Jacob, and speak, O Israel, my way is hidden from the Lord, and my just claim is passed over by my God? Have you not known? Have you not heard? The everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, neither faints nor is weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the weak, and to those who have no might he increases strength. The fascinating thing that I see here is the picture that the Bible paints is clearly that we are designed, but second, that designer is very interested in me.
Mm.
You know, it's interesting in John 16, for God so loved the world. He loved it. He made it. And so the picture that we see is of a God, a super intelligence who made us, loves us. For God so loved the world that he gave. And so for me, when I see this evidence of the designer, and I realize the incredible richness that God has put around us each, friendships, nature, family, and then I realize that this God who made me loves me. That's the story Scripture paints, ties them right together.
I think, can I jump in real
Yeah,
quick?
go
And
ahead.
I apologize. So I don't know if you know, but the big thing now in society is the push for creationism over evolution. A lot more people are going that route. And I think what we're doing here right now and what you're doing is precisely what needs to be said, because I can believe in creationism. I can believe, right, that something created us. But I think the next big thing is like you're doing now, is bringing it to God as far as being the creator. And one of my favorite verses is it Jeremiah 1:5? I believe that was the verse, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. So if we're dealing with a creator who formed everything in the world that we live in, to me it's a powerful, it touches my heart that to know that he created me.
And beyond his creation for you, that he loves you.
Right.
When I look at the creation, I am absolutely convinced that there's absolutely no chance that we arose by chance. There's absolutely none. And can I share one more verse with you? It says this. It's fascinating to me. It says in Romans 1, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, because what may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has shown it to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts. Their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools. This passage from Romans is saying that what may be known of God is plain to everyone.
Hmm.
Everyone, it says. Now, I believe that the common sense of this computer that I'm working on had a designer. I believe the same common sense argues that you and I, that are way more complicated than the computer that we're using right now, also had a designer. And the picture the Bible paints for you and I is that designer loves us.
Hmm.
He gave his life so that you and I can live. And to me, when I get the picture that God made the world and I see the beauty in our world, the next thought that comes to me is, I want to know that designer.
Hmm.
Why wouldn't I want to know the one who made me and who apparently had in his design my happiness,
Hmm.
my fulfillment?
Well, this was absolutely interesting to me to listen to you. Maybe next week we could talk about the love of God and what that is and what that means, because I think today we throw around the word love like chewing gum. I don't think the meaning is what God's love really is. You think we could have that as maybe a talk about that subject to understand what God's love is?
Sure. What is this God like?
Hmm. Absolutely.
Sounds good, Jeremy.
All right, my friend. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll talk next week.
Sounds good.